you would prefer the human race to endure, right?
Uh,
You're hesitating.
Yeah, well,
yes?
I don't know. I would.
This is a long hesitation. This is a long hesitation.
There's so many questions implicit in this.
Welcome to What's Left, a weekly political discussion challenging the mainstream left. My name is Andy Lipson. Joined with us today is Michael Hoffman. As you can see, Eduardo is not here. He is kind of on a week, maybe 2 weeks sabbatical. He'll be back in maybe 2 to 3 weeks. We are online at whatsleftpodcast.com. Please subscribe, rate, review, turn on your notifications, share your favorite episode, and jot down our information wherever you found this episode. And if you're interested in information about What's Left shirts, please contact me through whatsleftpodcast.com. So Eduardo's not here, but you may see here Kenny Ennis. We're joined by Kenny Ennis today. Now, Kenny is a longtime friend of both me and Michael. He's a former member of the ISO, fellow socialist. He will find out if he still describes himself as a Marxist or even a socialist, I guess. But Kenny is somebody I've known for a long time, and he's reached out, I think, Kenny, about, 3 months ago, or maybe a little bit longer, saying, Andy, what the hell is going on with AI? And you were very much concerned independently, it seemed, about what's happening with AI. And I felt you had a lot of interesting things to say, and were very passionate about the need to do something immediately and have started doing stuff. And so I wanted to invite you onto our show to just talk about yourself. I don't know if our own background in the ISO is going to come up here, but today I think we'll largely be talking about, from your vantage point, what are your thoughts and fears about AI? So welcome, Kenny.
Hi. Thanks a lot, Andy. I was just going to say, when I reached out to you a few months ago, I had just been watching what was going on, like so many people around the United States and around the world, with the insanity of what was happening politically. But also some names started popping up, and those were the things like Mencius mold bug and crazy stuff like that. And it took me back, and it forced me to kind of start reading and investigating the theory that was behind all this stuff. This stuff wasn't happening in a vacuum, and I think that's what really freaked me out, and what I've really gotten into trying to learn more about was what is happening with the people that are actually have their hands on the control of AI, and that is what I find extremely terrifying, and feel like that's why we have to do something urgently about it. So,
yeah, and I want to talk with you about that today, but maybe let's walk backwards, because both me and Michael at different times on What's Left have retraced a little bit of our journey since the ISO, since calling ourselves revolutionaries, being in a revolutionary organization. And I'd like to see if you want to trace your steps since you were in the ISO. When you were in there, you were a very active member. You were very dedicated. You were committed to revolution. And then you left the ISO. The ISO didn't just tank and you left. You left before the ISO tanked. So can you a little bit trace the arc for you, which I think maybe is 10, 15 years ago, to get us to this point where you are today?
Yeah. So, I had moved out here. This was like maybe the late 90s, 96, 97, something like that. You were still a teacher. No, you were still a researcher, Dr. Andy. And I think it was our good friend and comrade, Brian Belknap, who I actually met on the corner of 9th and Irving, I believe it was. And so, yeah. And then then I ended up meeting with you, and I'd always been sort of an activist. I grew up in Iowa. I saw the effects of policies on farmers, on the health of people, um, and so I was kind of and I always thought that it was classism. I always that was always just part of my my view. And then when I finally ran into the ISO, I hadn't really been exposed to a revolutionary socialist organization before. So when I was, and I was able to sit in a room with you and others, and saw your passion, your commitment, and then also started hearing, Marxist theory and Leninist ideology and all that stuff, and um, it immediately grabbed me because it was something that really made sense to me, and I remember just immediately being thrown into we were doing all kinds of work, like really amazing work. I thought, I particularly remember the doing stuff at like the Democratic National Convention, and that was a huge thing. There was Ozo Motley and Rage Against the Machine. The cops came out before, they gave us 5 minutes and just like really seeing, whose side the the police, how the power structures in this country, how it wasn't like there was a party for the working people, and that was very clear and just became more and more clear. And so I really did. I mean, I feel like I really tried to dig as deep as I could into that those what into the ideas and the work. And I also remember going to the protesting NAFTA and FTAA, and there was all these um, huge protests happening against the war, and kind of started linking all these things together. And there was AFL CIO, and then there was so union activists, student activists. There was a lot of culmination and people coming together. Mm-hmm. And then September 11th hit. And I think that was the first time I saw being part of a movement and then just saw the rug be pulled out from underneath it. I remember we were like doing a campaign with Nader, and then remember that was I would say that was the number one disillusionment. The first time it happened where I saw it, and I was like, oh, damn, it just takes something like that to completely bring the left to its knees. And then it was like, well, then that left has to be stronger. The leadership has to be stronger, so it can be in a point of where it can, when something like that happens, there's leadership to jump in place and say, wait a second, and not forget what we were fighting against to begin with, or fighting for, I should say. And then I think that we saw a few of those kinds of things as I was involved. I think when it really I became disillusioned with the work. I'm trying to think of timelines here. It was a while ago, but in my mind, and the way I'm remembering it, anyways, the Barack Obama campaign came around, and I saw that people were very confused. It seemed very confusing, and I felt like the left was biting off its own tail, and I feel like I just got to the point where I felt like, I'm driving everyone in my life crazy. I'm running around with like a chicken with my head cut off, which is not, and then thinking I have got to do something different. And at that point, I kind of pulled back, and then stuff happened with the ISO. I think that's sort of the timeline. That's kind of the timeline I experienced in my memory right now. But at any rate, I got disillusioned with the way the left was, I think, and I felt like, I was having kids, I had young kids. There was things like that, and I felt like I needed to figure out something else. But I mean, getting to your question about whether I consider myself a socialist and a Marxist, and I believe I still do largely, although I'm not, having study groups with what is to be done, and reading volumes of Das Kapital or whatever. But I feel like I still see the struggle as being one between capital. It is a struggle between that and workers, and I feel like I still believe that the only way that we're going to change society is when workers unite and consolidate around, you know, uplifting themselves. Does that answer that question?
It does. Let me see if Michael, you want to ask anything around that period before we move on.
Well, I will say that one of the things that I've always admired about you, Kenny, even since I think I got to know you more actually after the ISO and running into you in various capacities. But you also have been, I feel like what you got involved in was a lot of like building things and connecting people and, making businesses that were maybe seemed less alienated, right? You're a vegan chef and you organized a restaurant. You've had a few different restaurants. You also are a contractor. Like I've always seen you as like organizing things and building things, and I think you're really good at that. You actually did a lot of amazing work on my mom's house. And so I just, I wonder how, like, you just laid out this thing that you agree. I mean, you laid out that you agree with the general framework, but like also you are also like a business owner. And that was like a way that you found you could have, it seems to me like a way that you found you could have some control over what you were creating. And I understand, I sympathize with that, or not sympathize, or I understand that. I love going to your cafe, and so I don't know if you. I wanted to just also say that about you because you're wonderful. You're actually like an incredible chef, an incredible musician as well. Should say that. So how do you feel like that? Like I don't know if you could just talk about like how those things were like outlets for things you felt you needed in your life,
Yeah. Well, thank you for that. Those are all nice things to say. Yeah, I feel like that's the only honest. Okay, so there's a couple things about that. I feel like that's what I have to do. I don't feel like I have certain limitations with like following directions and like that kind of thing. So, owning like building businesses or whatever, was a way that I could function in society, I feel like, and be a part of it, but also do it in a way that I thought that I was trying to add to the planet in a good way. I'm trying to, with the restaurants, it's always been trying to build a space where people can come and break bread. Like, I really feel like that's a really important thing, where they're, having spaces where people can sit with each other and eat and talk, that's been an important thing. So I also get to open my space and do it, without trying to make really a profit, just trying to survive so that people can have meetings or celebrations or whatever. So that's one thing, is like kind of physical space, trying to do that. Vegan activism is actually something that I believe in, as a kind of reduction of suffering. I know me and Andy have had arguments about that many times in the past, but it's like that again. That's just something that I hold in my heart, not so much as something I'm trying to go out there and preach that to anybody or anything. But at least have a space for that, and then also I try to run the restaurant and my carpentry company and stuff in a way that's kind of collective, um, not so much of a hierarchy, and no, I don't. It's not a perfect. It's not running everything as a co-op or anything like that. Which I don't even know if that's a perfect thing. But I mean, I am trying to. I feel like that these are all things that I do try to build space where we can do things together. That trying to make beautiful spaces, and same with music. I try to make art, and so thank you for recognizing that stuff. I do feel like it's all an important part of the way that I feel I relate to the planet and others.
Yeah, and I guess one of the impressions that you really left on me, Kenny. First of all, the word passionate keeps coming up. I don't think you can be a revolutionary without being passionate, but there's something extra about you. And I don't know if you recognize it, so I'd be curious with how you see it, because that's the word that really comes to mind when I think about how you approached politics. But there's another thing that you did that I felt like that I really looked up to is I tended to put little walls in places. Here's my socialist cell, here's my work cell, here's my family life. Sometimes when back in the ISO, those things were very compartmentalized. As I've grown older and as I feel like I've become more comfortable in my political skin, I'm doing that less. I still feel like there's segmentation, but I always felt that you were just like you were a socialist with us, but you were the same guy in your music and in your play. That's what it appeared to me, and I really thought that was a you were just very natural in the way you carried politics into the other parts of your life. I wonder if you're aware of that, and so I just wanted to share. I wanted to see what you had to say about that before we kind of move on to the next part.
Um, it's funny you say that. That's what I've always thought about you. I'm like, in fact, I was like, man, this guy's quitting his. I was like, this is what it's like to be a revolutionary. You're going to quit being a research, and go and teach at a high school. I don't think there's anything more punk rock, socialist, revolutionary than that. Um, well, thank you for letting me be a part of that club, because I try to be integrated and be the same person as much as I can be. I haven't really thought about that too much, but I do feel like I feel like I'm just going to use veganism as an example for a second, because I believe that veganism is the food of the revolution for a couple different reasons, and I always have, because and it kind of goes back to this thing that I read that the Buddha said one time. And it was that when the last animal is eaten, that's an end of suffering. And so I always kind of figured like that's either when all humanity kind of realizes that we're all interconnected, and we've advanced past the point of wanting to make anything suffer, and then, or the other is that we just have met complete annihilation and we can't hurt each other or anything anymore. So that I feel like I do try to be the same person wherever I'm at. So thank you for that.
Then I think that's a good segue, the end of everything, to really kind of your more recent political journey that's taken you really much in this direction of getting involved in learning about AI, learning about tech, or really AI and tech, and getting in these various circles. How did this start? When did this start? And maybe describe a little bit what your journey to this point.
Okay. Well, I think I've always been kind of considered myself somewhat of a Luddite with technology, and I wasn't so much going to go smashing things up and doing that kind of stuff, but I just felt like we have to, like, I was probably the last person in my age group to get a cell phone. I fought it to the very end, and because I thought it's gonna make my life harder. It's gonna make, people are gonna call me all the time, and so, but over the last, I would say, year and a half, 2 years. And I have to say, this is going to sound crazy, but the thing that's really caught my attention, it started out maybe with Lyft and Uber, um, and taking taxi drivers' jobs away from them, and then all the food stuff. Like, I've always had restaurants, and all of a sudden you couldn't have drivers go out to deliver your food. You had to have 10 of these iPads where some other company was Uberizing the whole process of you getting food and tacking on fees and taking what little bit of money that, say, a restaurant makes. They're taking it and feeding something that's owned by like a handful of people, relatively, and it just seemed like theft to me, and it seemed so obvious. It's like we have to figure out ways. I was trying to connect with other restaurants and try to figure out ways where we could collectively hire drivers and use our own drivers so that they got paid well, got, insurance, all that stuff, and they weren't getting, instead, it's kind of the way it is now. So that was sort of the beginning of me just being really frustrated with a particular type of technology that was happening. And then seeing, the self-driving cars come out. I have this whole art project in my mind I'm working on to have AI art. This will be the only time I use AI like this, but have AI art. But it's me as Don Quixote attacking the like Waymos and stuff. It's like done in the Stations of the Cross. Anyways. So I started seeing those Waymos driving around, and I think that was the last straw for me. It was like I almost got hit by one down in the Tenderloin, and I think that just like that clicked in me that okay, uh, I really am really against this. I've been saying, man, they're just gonna those same companies are using all that money, like the Lyft and Uber. They're using all that money to get self-driving cars, and then those self-driving cars are going to take people's jobs. And there was no political will to say, hey, stop this. There was no. I didn't see anyone on none of the Democrats, none of the Republicans. Nobody was saying. They were just giving in San Francisco, just giving these. There would be a little pushback because people didn't want it, and they have to appease that. But ultimately, they were going to get the contracts. They're getting more and more Waymos. Now you can't. You go down outside my house, and I live near the Excelsior in San Francisco, near John McLaren Park, and I'll see 10 of those things right here, right now. It's crazy.
Yeah.
How fast that happened, how fast that stuff's happening, and that hasn't even. The next thing is Tesla is ready to go. They're ready to just you'll be able to buy your Tesla, and then at night it will drive around, pick people up for you, and make Tesla some money, and hypothetically make you some money. I mean, it just seems
Yeah.
seems bonkers. But anyway, so that got me thinking about this kind of, which was like the policies, what kind of policies are in play, and so I started looking into AI and what was happening with AI. And then I started looking at one company in particular. And because the fear is that, well, you can, we know that they changed to these large language models in, like, 2018 or whatever, and that shifted everything, because after that AI started advancing very quickly, and it's just going so fast. And now you have, the general census now is that we're going to have AGI within the next year, if it has
artificial
general intelligence, where it's as smart as the smartest person.
Yeah.
Right. After that, they said it could be 15 minutes. They have no real idea, but it could be 15 minutes, could be 3 years, could be 5 years. We're going to have some ASI, or artificial super intelligence, which is like 400 times the smartest person. Well, that is scary at that point, because when you're like, Einstein was like 137 or whatever. The highest, the lowest IQ of a really functioning person is like 80 or something like that. So he was twice as smart as the. So if something is 400 smarter than our smartest person, which has like a 200 IQ, we think we're going to be able to control that thing. That just seemed like bonkers. That seemed like a really bad idea. That we've all seen the movie, and it didn't end well, and it never ends well. Like, and this is different because this is also a super intelligent being that we don't even really understand how it works. Even like people that are in the field don't understand it completely. Some of the language, some of the way that it's able to do workarounds and stuff. So, so that's scary. But there's also, there could be a positive end to all that stuff too. So, and that's something we can talk about too. But the thing that I kept coming back to is, well, what if you militarize it? What happens then? And then you see China's doing it. You see all these different countries doing it. And then you look at a company. So I started looking into one. Well, I started looking into one company in particular, and that was Palantir in this country. And Palantir is why I find, because I find the people that own it and founded it and running it are reprehensible. Peter Thiel, him and Karp, Alex Karp, the CEO. They have really deep, dark, ideological. They are transhumanists. They want to openly so. They want to get rid of democracies. They think that regular people, should not be having a say because we're not capable of it. We're not smart enough somehow, or something. They are, and they are now they have these huge defense contracts with the United States, Israel, Britain, some places in California. Like, I think there's certain towns that have contracts with them for surveillance and just data. Just taking up all our data that's out there, data farming, and using it specifically to control. They want to be the largest defense contractor, bringing the United States into a new era of defense contract. And they are some of the leading people in AI. And so I started looking into them. I looked into all of a sudden. Then that introduced me to Kurdish Yarvin, or Mencius Moldbug. And I figured anybody who went by a name Mencius Moldbug had to have like some kind of like dark,
Wait, can you?
Yeah.
I mean, what does that name mean? Like
Mencius Moldbug? Mencius Moldbug was his podcast name, his like pen name. He's kind of a secret writer on the alt-right.
Okay.
And he influenced all these people like Kurdish Yarvin. So he influenced people. His name is actually Kurdish Yarvin. He influenced people like Peter Thiel. He's also Vance is one of his Vice President Vance is a follower of him, or looks at his writings with lean. What he is, he's sort of a right wing. I think he thinks of himself as an intellectual or philosopher, but it's really kind of like an anti-enlightenment. In fact, they call it the dark enlightenment theory. Mm-hmm. And these guys want to have like a corporate monarchy. And, the way that they talk about doing it is putting the strong man in office. And like basically you start looking at what's happening in this country and other places too, like Argentina. And these guys are all influenced by that techie fascist movement. And it's real. It sounds like a conspiracy theory, but you can just go Google their speeches and read their writings and stuff, and it's right there. They're not hiding anything from anybody. It is right in your face. This is what they want to do. This is the plan. And so that, I think, got me to become an activist, where I decided, okay, I'm going to start going into, try to sit in rooms with these people and listen to them and talk to them and find out, and not only them, but also people that are trying to make the policies and stuff. So my first event, I mean, I had gone to some small things with discussion groups with AI, but I got invited to, and I still get invited to them, and I'm very appreciative. There's a guy who invited me to an AI like dinner, and this particular one was on veganism and AI. So that was how I had my in. I got my in that way. And so I went to that, and I learned all kinds of stuff. They figured out that AI was able to figure out that humpback whales have actual language. There's certain things that are in every language, and the whale song has those things. So they're actually speaking language. They have dialects, different pods, but they speak the same when they're together, and they speak a little bit different when they're in there. They've got their slang or whatever. So, and they're like, we're gonna be able to decipher that stuff. So that was kind of what that was about. Or you're gonna be able to have a conversation with your dog. It's interesting stuff, but kind of light. And then just to kind of jump forward, the last one I went to was just a couple days ago, with a guy named Steve Hilton, who some people may know. He was the director of strategy for the Prime Minister, was David Cameron. He also is a Fox News
And
contributor.
David Cameron is the British the former
and Brexit and all that stuff, right? And then Steve Hilton so he did that. And Steve Hilton now is a Fox commentator, and now lives in California, and is going to be the gubernatorial candidate for the governor. And so it was billed as a meeting with him, where he'd be talking about public policy and AI. So I thought, okay, this is gonna be interesting. I'm going to hear what these folks are talking about as far as what do they see public policy being? Because I mean, everything I've kind of seen from the Democrat side is, they kind of they'll say things like about privacy and that, but they haven't written anything into any of the legislation or anything that would like support the Fourth Amendment or anything like that. They're not doing anything that's going to help. It's just I feel like it's very weak. But so I went to this thing, and there's all these people ahead of their field. Every time I go to these, like, people very high up in the field of AI in the Silicon Valley here. And basically what I heard was liberal feeling people, or one person introduced herself as a socialist. What did she say she was? A socialist libertarian. which I've never heard that term before. But they kind of feel like they're warm and fuzzy and have these kind of feelings, but ultimately what they want is deregulation. They want to maintain deregulation in the and not all of them. There were some folks that were like, but no one was sounding the alarms. And this guy, who's a likable fellow, he's likable. He drives a big truck around that says, "Make California gold again." That's his motto. But the interesting thing, I went to this meeting about policy, and the thing that was fascinating to me was I was there for a couple hours sitting around, and there was zero talk about public policy. Because first of all, no one knows what that looks like. What he thought public policy meant for it was to get rid of environmental regulations that prohibit these massive data farms to be in California because they take so much power. These supercomputers, these super AI things were like 100 mega volts or whatever. It's just so much energy that these things take, and they pollute, because he's like, there's no way we can't cover the power that we need using green alternatives. So we need gas turbines, and then ultimately we need nuclear. And that was his thing. And these things need to have massive power so we can keep these companies in California and make California gold again. And that was the extent of the public policy,
And they actually require lots of water.
Yeah.
And it needs to be, somewhat clean water, right? So they use potable water to keep these data centers cooled. In a state that's constantly on the edge of drought, if not in a drought. Yeah, so I don't know if he was talking about that. I just wanted to add in.
Yeah, no, I'm sorry, I just went off, but yeah, no, that's exactly what I'm talking about. It's like there's no sane. So I figure we need to figure that out. We need to build a people's movement that is forcing those kinds of things out there. I'm not exactly sure how to do that.
Mm-hmm. And I guess one question, Michael, you might have another one, but so what makes it that you have been able to kind of get in these, what are in quotes, kind of a more elite circles to have the discussions there? Like, how were you able to get there? Because even if I wanted to, I wouldn't really have been able to get there. I'm not sure if, Michael, you feel like you could. I don't even know the people who you would know. And you invited me to one of those meetings of Silicon Valley tech people, kind of managerial level, maybe a little bit above. Some had small businesses, small tech companies who were talking about AGI. Were they concerned about it? Were they not concerned about it? Why are you able to get in those kind of circles?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's luck, because I met some people through the restaurant and other things, and then I've been going to them now. So yeah, I'm not I think I'm kind of like, I feel like, and I would never have done it. I feel like a fish out of water. I mean, I really feel I'm in those things. I feel like I'm a complete fraudster, which I am. Yeah, I have some friends that I've been able to make that I've been able to gain access to some of those things, and they are fascinating, because I feel like those are the rooms where if there could be more lively discussion and debate about it, it may have some impact. at some level, not the level that things need to happen. Because, but yeah, I don't know. I think it's mostly just kind of luck and meeting the right people. And I think really that first initial meeting with veganism and AI was what gave me the introduction, and now I keep getting introduced to them.
Michael, you want to?
When we talked last on the phone, you mentioned actually something about that veganism and AI event. You mentioned that there was some debate at that one too. Like I think you were saying that some high level people were at that thing, and that you had some debate. In the end, what did they propose AI's role was in veganism? Just humanizing animals?
I mean, so part of it is humanizing animals. That was I think a big part of it. Part of it was that one of the things that they said they'd be able to do was they are going to be able to figure out language models for animals. I mean that is coming. So what it basically means is like people will be able to an animal will be able to tell us that it's uncomfortable or it's hurting or something like that. And so the sort of the theory is, well, if people are having a conversation with an animal, at a factory farm, maybe they'll try to change it, because I mean factory farms are pretty disgusting, so maybe they would find at least a more humane way of dealing with that. So that was sort of the crux of that was. There was a guy there that was had worked for Neuralink, Elon Musk's, the is that what it's called, Neuralink?
Yeah, crazy put something in chip in your head.
Yeah, chip in your head, and yeah, I mean these guys, a lot of them believe that AI is going to, and I think that this kind of discussion we need to have in society, because AI there's a great potential for AI to do a lot of wonderful things, So people that are in the medical field, they can see advancements coming. You can see it happening all the time. There's new advances. AI is finding new things. Just about any discipline that you look into, AI is figuring out, is able to do calculations at a much greater scale and can figure things out. So there's potential. If say ASI comes along, the artificial superintelligence, that will be able to solve if there was a person alive today that was 400 times smarter than the smartest guy who lives in, I think he lives in England or something like that. He's got like a 210 IQ. So someone who's 400 to 800 IQ or something, that being is probably going to be able to figure out 0-point energy. There's a good chance if it's figure outable, that type of thought is going to be able to do it. It will be able to automate all production. So so some of them look at this as being, this is the way that human beings can get out of toil and can live in this utopia, And what I try to bring up to them is that may be true, but who's going to be on? There's still going to be something on top that's kind of running the show, and if that thing doesn't, I mean, how much do we care about an ant? Kind of that thing. Why are we charging forward towards something that we have no idea? And in the short term, there's going to be, everyone is going to become, it's either going to be serf or this tiny little trillionaire class, or millionaire, billionaire. Probably it's going to go a couple trillionaires, couple hundred billionaires, maybe some millionaires, and then everyone else is going to be serf, you know. And but there doesn't seem to be an answer for that. I haven't really met anybody at any of these things that says, yeah, I want to get out of this business altogether, you know, which is alarming to me.
Well, would you think there maybe? Well, I would say there's no answer they can give, because they're not going to be looking for that answer. The answer they're looking for is a technology which will allow them to polarize everything. Wealth in one direction, misery in the other direction, centralized control at the top, directing people what to do, and knowing what people are going to do, and being able to predict what they're going to do, and then being able to like control the information that they get, and the ones who are the outliers, you know, you better identify them. You know, my opinion is I don't see any way that AI, like you kind of opened a door a little bit when you said, well, maybe AI could be this. In my opinion, there is no future for humanity with AI, because it is a technology of centralization for a few against many. And I don't, it can't be, I don't think it can be turned to something good. They can tell us that, oh, we'll have a few people walk with the neural link, or we're going to like figure out the protein folding problem, or we'll get a few diseases figured out, maybe a bunch of diseases. But that doesn't change the fact that this technology is there. It's not only there to make the rich richer, if you will. It's like what you said. What if they militarize it? It is a military product. The internet was made by DARPA. All these other things are sideshows to what really is, at the end of the day, a product to win wars, or a technology to win wars. So I don't think it's just about militarizing it. It existed as a militarized creature, like the internet was, like DARPA. That's not like a throwaway thing. All these other things we talk about are kind of like, well, the panels of the space shuttle can be used to put your food in the microwave, and when you grab it, then it doesn't, your hands don't get burned. That's not what they put the space shuttle up there, so people's hands don't get burned in the microwave. They put the space shuttle up there because the space program is a military product.
Yeah.
So I guess I wonder what you have to say about that.
No, I mean, I 100% agree with that. I feel like, and looking at who has their hands on, and they know it's really obvious when you start looking at the behavior of the people that have their hands on the levers of control of it. So Sam Altman had this great idea of having open AI, and it was going to be a free thing, and now it's not a free thing anymore. And now he's got defense contracts. I think it's pretty obvious, you know, and the fact that so many of them are transhumanists, that they want to merge with AI, you know, and like anything else, like if you're rich, you're going to have a fancy car, and if you're poor, you're going to walk. And you know, if you're super rich, you know, Peter Thiel thinks he's going to live forever. You know, that's his goal. Well, maybe Peter Thiel will, but the mass majority of people are going to die miserably under his, exactly what you said, like Palantir being you know, taking your information and weaponizing it against you and controlling you with it. So I agree. The one thing I would say is there is so much, we are so close to getting to a point where it's going to be very difficult to shut it off, you know, and there's only one way to shut it off, and that's to like take the power away from it. And it's a global problem. So it has to be a global solution to it. And that is daunting with the amount of power and control they already have. And it's just, it is going, not to be a bummer and not to try to, I don't want to be like I don't want to sound like like I have no hope. I do have hope. I kind of go in between, going in and out of having hope for humanity, and sometimes feeling like, oh, do we even deserve it? When you see stuff like Palestine and places like that, you just how awful human beings are to each other. But you look at it's still the same people on top. It's just that it's not all. Most human beings are really, really good, when it comes down to it, and it's just these awful people on top who just happen to have. So, with that said, I totally agree with what you said about it, though, and think that we have to do something about it.
I really actually appreciated your expanding on the whole thing about how if AI can figure out animal language, then somehow we're going to alleviate their suffering because they're going to tell people that they're suffering. And it made me think about, this is exactly the kind of capitalist delusion that they use to sell their, to basically sell their next wave of investments. And you can tell like how absurd that is, because there's lots of human beings who are perfectly able to express their suffering, and what is the response of capital, right? So like, okay, so we're gonna have suffering-free farms, like, and yet you're telling us that we have to just sit on our hands while there's a genocide in Gaza, and that there's nothing we can do about Sudan, and there's nothing we can do about Congo, and there's nothing we can do, that's exactly, it's such a great example of the bullshit of capitalist ideology. And one of the things that was heartening for me about the growth of AI, and in terms of the predictions about its development and the predictions of AGI and ASI, I'm now much more on the critical side of it, where I think that they are overblowing those things because it's getting them investment money. And we're coming to a point where AI is becoming more and more like a bubble. Like, they're now like trying to desperately extract some surplus value out of these AI things that they've developed and have pushed into all these areas that they can. There's a billboard that I sent to, there's a billboard on 101, and it says, all that AI and no ROI, question mark, meaning like these businesses have put all of this investment into AI systems and there hasn't been any necessarily return on investment. And partially why, and so this billboard was selling a service to help you get ROI out of your AI, right? I mean, it's Silicon Valley, so it's,
right.
There's layers of companies to service companies, But the other thing about the development of AI is it really is like a crude imitation of a human brain, in the sense that they really do model computationally the way that brains form and learn. And so one of the things about, and I believe, and I am with you more on the, like, there could be real human problems that this kind of technology could help us with. I think Andy and I are not quite on the same page with that kind of thing. But like, the thing that is much like any human brain is it depends on how it's been developed, right? It actually takes a lot of this energy is training an AI system. It's like the equivalent of, all of your years of schooling. It's like, it's basically like you're taking all of this information and putting it through this brain that's learning from that information. And so the model of the human brain that they have going, that's led to advancements. I'm not saying that there's nothing real behind AI. What I'm saying is that the level to which they actually understand how human intelligence works is actually very low still. And it's still, so a lot of times when they're saying, oh, it's going to hit this point at this certain amount of time, they're basically looking at computational output per unit cost. And, it's basically an assumption that an exponential curve is going to keep going. And that's what a lot of those predictions are based on. And we know, like in the housing crisis, when capitalists are saying this exponential curve is going to keep going, it doesn't always work, right? So there's a lot of people who are like, AGI is not actually really theoretically necessarily possible at all. And so to me, the reason why that argument is important is because I think, and this is the argument I made in the last AI discussion we had, which is that the problem is not that this technology is going to get out of people's control. The problem is that it's being trained and developed specifically for extracting surplus value from the economy. It's trained to basically dominate and automate. And the number one reason why Sam Altman was getting, billions of dollars in investment was with the promise that it will reduce labor costs, with the promise essentially that it will replace labor. And so it's sort of more like the problem is still fucking capitalism.
Mm-hmm.
Like I didn't try to come back to that conclusion. I honestly meaning like I want to be afraid of the technology, but I'm only afraid of the technology because of who has built it. And you know what I'm saying? Like, yeah. It's like if the people in power train it, it's gonna be used for their selfish, their selfish anti-human interests, and beyond the immediate technologies that they're trying to use to make money, there's also like a global capitalist crisis of profitability, which is also driving a lot of this as well, right? So, there's just a lot of fictitious capital that they're trying to find some way to make it real. They're trying to find new ways to extract value out of things. And there's kind of a desperation that is also expressed in this kind of these delusions about we're going to solve all these problems and we're going to save humanity. We're going to stop suffering, mm-hmm. Right? Just like, just as much as they stopped the suffering in Palestine.
Right. I agree with that. I think the one question I would ask is, well, I mean, with the folks that are in charge of this stuff, like the Peter Thiels, Palantir, these corporate things. I feel like they're not even at some point. It's not even with them. It's leaving. They're kind of leaving capitalism behind. And I mean, they're still going to be capitalists. It's still going to be capitalist, but it's going to be. I really feel like that's the push towards authoritarianism that we're seeing globally, because I agree with you that the capitalism is in crisis, and in order for them to hold on to the power, they have to use this technology right now to oppress. Does that make sense? I mean, I feel like I feel like it's more in your face right now than I've seen it in my lifetime. I mean, I know that I'll get pushed back against that, but I mean, I feel like that's how I'm seeing it with the role of that technology as that technology has emerged. The ability of that technology to be used in a way like worse, I feel like, even than any George Orwell view of it, 1984 picture of what the future could be like. I feel like it's a consolidation of power happening right now. Does that make sense? I don't know if I made that clear.
I actually am. I think what you said about that they're moving away from capitalism is I'm also more convinced that is true in the sense that they also can't make profit from exploiting labor anymore.
Mm-hmm.
So I actually do think they're moving away from sort of capitalism as we understand it. And that's what Fabio Vihi argues in his book, which is that they're moving away from our economy is shifting away from labor as generating value to, uh, like the capitalist economy is moving away from that to just complete fictitious debt-driven value that's completely divorced from actual labor. And there's some things I don't understand about that point, but I do think that it's the fact that the idea that they're moving away from capitalism like is an interesting insight. I do think it's true in a sense, because actually I think they're being forced to move away from capitalism and more towards just direct control.
I want to shift the conversation. This will probably be the last point, but I think it might take us some time on this. I want to shift the conversation to a question of Stop AI. I know I'm part of a group, Stop AI, and I know Kenny is like, yes, Stop AI. And Michael, I think you would be a guy who say, yeah, we should stop AI. Or is that true or not? I'm kind of can't tell.
Oh, I just feel like the only way we're going to stop AI is through a global revolution.
Right. Okay.
Against capitalism.
Yeah. Okay.
It's like, yeah, let's really stop it.
Right. So, and I agree with that.
Yeah.
But anyway, I want to take this moment to talk about how we all think about the beginning steps of, well, for me, it's true. Stop AI is ultimately like a revolutionary demand. I don't think you can stop it without a complete an alteration of society that goes in a completely different direction than the direction it is going, and that capitalism has taken it, will take it. That's how I look at it. But I want to talk about the picture now. Like when you think about Stop AI, what does that mean? And I know you and I have had a discussion, even debate about where do we operate with regards to trying to figure out how to do that. And like you had invited me into circles that were a little higher up on the food chain, if you will. And I was maybe a little skeptical of the possibility of that reaping any benefits. But I'll just say where my starting point is about Stop AI. If I thought I was making progress, I still think of it as something that's at work, and that it would be done. I would be having colleagues who were like Kenny or Michael, who were like, this shit has got to go. Like, I remember talking to a colleague who was saying, hey, you could, like, we were talking out of professional development, and he goes, oh, you could use AI to do that. And I go, I don't use AI. I said, I don't use AI. What I probably should have meant to say is I don't intentionally use AI. I use it all the time. I know that. It's built within, it
uses you
here. And you can shut off a piece of it, but it's still in operation and up to GPS and blah, blah, blah. So my accurate statement is I don't intentionally use AI. And then he was set back. And then a colleague of mine who is closer to me, he said about me, he goes, yeah, he's kind of like John Connor like that, but what I mean to say is that if I thought about making headway in my zone on this, it would be teachers at my workplace who would be kind of pulling the copper out of the walls and not allowing data to be collected on students, and really be thinking that we are AI generating centers. Like AFT is saying, let's figure how we can use AI. I would think about making progress by doing it with fellow teachers. That's my beat, like right now, if I think about it. And secondly, I've been increasingly thinking, and this is in relationship to talking to Jay and JD, who built an alternative school in North Carolina, that in some ways, and you can address this if you want, Kenny or Michael, that ultimately Stop AI is not the slogan, it's build humanity. And if we just think of it in terms of stop, we're not going to be able to think creatively enough about what are we trying to go for. And I do think AI and this tech and the tech that you use here is anti-human. So those are the threads that I think about when I think about building right now. It doesn't exist except for I'm in part of a Stop AI group, but we're all isolated in our respective zones. So when I think about starting that journey, that is a journey that leads towards a revolutionary transformation. That's my starting point. And I wanted to see what other people would say about that. And maybe Kenny, you can take that up, and Michael, I'd like to hear what you have to say as well.
I mean, this is what I feel like this is the question that I ask myself a lot, like daily. How do we push back against it? How do we stop it? How do we build? I feel like when you're isolated, it's really easy to be isolated, and I feel like you. Like I will never get into a WAYMO. I don't feel like that's enough though. There has to be a movement that has that as a central part of it. And it comes down to good old activism, like the olden days. Like we still have that. That's still very important for. I mean, you can see people are fed up with a lot of stuff around the world, and we don't always get to see everything that's happening because the media. There's media blackouts on everything, but people. I feel like there is a bubbling of, like, if we were in the ISO, let's take this what's happening now and just push it back to 20 years ago. I feel like there would be a lot more public swelling around, not just all these things would be started to kind of coalesce together. It's not only the attack on immigrant. How can you blame an immigrant, which makes up like 1% of the population? You blame them for taking our jobs, but the people that are really taking our jobs is the 1%, these billionaires. And you start hearing that a lot. I was sitting down with a little old lady the other day, and she's like, "The problem's these fucking billionaires." I was like, "Whoa!" So I feel like she was, it was, but I feel like that's what we need to do somehow, and we have to figure out how to rebuild a left that is, and a movement that not necessarily left either. I think that there's a big opening to bring just people in, and then kind of talk about the world that we want ahead of us. Everybody wants jobs. Everyone wants their children to have jobs. Everyone wants to have. So I mean, I feel like that doing it in our workplace, like you said, Andy, but also like trying to reach out and build coalitions between different groups and really build a movement against it is the only. And we have to do it immediately. Can
I ask a question about that?
Yeah.
Like, given your access to people who are kind of closer to the technology, do you feel there's a place there? Like, if you could operate there, is there a place to operate there to stop it and do something? Or are you like, nah, I don't think that exists?
I think those people, this is their livelihood. And some of them recognize the risks, but are more still excited about what they're doing and still believe in it. And I think eventually, I think probably within the next year or so, there's going to be, like Larry Ellison just laid off, I don't know how many people. There's going to be a lot more of that wave of people, sort of the white collar. In fact, there was a woman at the last meeting who was like, "I've heard a lot about blue collar workers, but what about all the white collar workers that are going to be losing their jobs? We need to have." That was one thing that somebody said about some policy, because I think that they do recognize that they really are the capitalists making their own grave diggers, are being their own grave diggers. So I feel like there probably is an opening in that, and the people that are going to be disenfranchised by the systems that they're building. But I think it's much more on the bottom, the people that have the most to lose. That's where we need to build out of.
My interaction is still centered around Palestine, because that's the and focusing on Palestine brought me to a protest at Palantir. So it's like that's where I go, and I talk to people who are thinking about the entire system and thinking about, that's the way that I've met people who are talking about what I want to talk about, which is like, how can we change the structure of the system so that it is actually for humanity and building humanity. And it's that, I don't know, but right now I feel really raw about it, actually, because it feels really hard. It feels really hard, especially in this Palestine space where, we've gone from pictures of, children being blown in half to now just people starving, right? And what it takes to starve people to death, and then shoot them when they line up for food, right? And the world is so clearly against it. And this is how they use their power. And so it's demoralizing, right? I mean, it's like we need some kind of connections that feed and humanize us in this work, right? And that's what brings me to it. I think, I missed the last conversation you had about, the spirit or spirituality, or like the feeling of like what motivates us, and, just the beauty of human beings and what happens, when humans connect and create, and how we're able to care for each other, and how we're able to learn that, I feel like, I just want that to be set free. I want humans to thrive with each other, because there's no physical reason why we can't. We also, I think it's natural for humans. It's like all this modern research, even about the brain and cognitive science, points back to that. We completely depend on community. We're motivated by our connections with each other. We can't even really learn things unless it's somehow socially mediated through other human beings. Like, there's also just research that shows how, which is all stuff we knew, it's all stuff we learn every time there's a disaster. What do regular people do? They're like, holy shit, what do you need? This is what I have. Or, asking for help and giving help. People freely give what they have to each other to survive. And we're it's just so heartbreaking how this world is right now. And it's crazy to think about 20 years ago, like you were saying, Kenny, because back then, if you had talked about how the fundamental issue is capitalism, there would have been a bunch of people to red bait you, and you would have been just like brushed aside. People would have gotten really uncomfortable. And now, when you say things like that in a room, people are like, yeah. It's almost like there's this dichotomy of like things are really obvious, but now there's even less of a chance to even do something with that, right? It's like the organizational home for that has been smashed, and it's like we're trying to rebuild it. But a lot of stuff has developed to prevent us from organizing around it. So I don't know. It makes me really sad, but it's also like when I'm also mostly heartened by having conversations like that, like having a connection with people who at least are trying to figure this out, and meeting people who are like, yeah, this is fucked up. I wish we could do something about it, and at the same time, it's very, but yeah, we should go out to one of those data centers and get a mob of people and tear that fucking thing down. I mean, I don't know,
Yeah. Well,
I'm down for smashing all the WAYMOs, but
I
don't know.
The thing that comes to my mind, and I'm not saying this is right, but I can, this is how I'm operating, because I'm not in a particular community that's organizing and fighting a particular thing. Like things are atomized, not at my work. Even the to Stop AI group is like disparate people who kind of come together, but there's no connection that you can say, okay, here's how we could begin to like make some forward progress. But one thing I notice whenever I talk about immigration, whenever I talk about Ukraine or Palestine, when I talk about immigration, I start to talk about biometrics and surveillance. When I talk about Palestine, I make sure to talk about lavender and where's daddy. When I talk about Ukraine, I talk about drones and the fact that drone development is having become AI run as a means for drones to be more successful and not being able to be blocked. Because I can sense I'm trying to feed within anybody I'm talking to the notion that yes, capitalism, but actually running through all this is like this electrical wire that I want to point out that is in society that is kind of has to be ripped out. And I'm not saying that's right, but I notice that's a trend I have as I talk. And in education, it's ed tech. That's what I thought. There's 1,000 problems in education, but the one I keep coming back to is ed tech. And the fact that they're trying to like make it so that we don't teach our own curriculum, so they can replace us with a robot that can teach our curriculum, blah, blah, blah. So I think that is in the absence of anything centralized that I'm organized in. I do believe there's almost like I noticed a centralized theme around my talking points that are around this tech and leads to AI.
That is, I feel like that it becomes a part of every conversation. It is the thing that links it all together. It's how the power structure, the people that are in power are holding on to power and planning on, and it's how they're getting away with it and how they keep us so splintered and stuff. Yeah, I feel like it's right. It's right to have a movement that puts all these things together. When I was at that meeting with Steve Hilton, that's just reminded me of something. He went at length about the teachers union and how they were the enemy and how they give tenure. You work there for a couple, a year or 18 months, and you have lifelong tenure, and you can't get rid of bad teachers and stuff like that. And how he wanted, and he's talking about using technology, just like you said. I mean, it's basically get rid of teachers, and you know,
Well, by the way, AFT agrees with him on that. Anyway, just go ahead. And I probably agree with Steve Hilton about kind of being into you now.
Now you're
a different angle, but anyway.
But for the other reason, he's like, other reasons. It's like, fuck you, Steve Hilton. You don't even know. Don't pretend like they don't help you.
Yeah, sorry about that.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Anyways, I feel like those are the kind of connections we have to make. I don't know how to. It just feels. I feel like it's very daunting to figure out a way to sit in a room with all these different groups. I mean, nobody's calling them. I don't feel like there's like. I remember I went to like that protest that was out there, just kind of see what was going on. That No Kings one, and it was definitely not a very political event, and there was like one group of people, chanting Palestine, for Palestine, and nobody, you could hear them cutting through the silence that was around them, and but I think that even that over the last couple of months, I feel like I don't know. I feel like it's still hard to have that conversation, but somehow there has to be an opening for us to put a movement together that's really effective. I just don't know where that is.
Yep.
That's frustrating. That is very frustrating. When you see, Michael, how you're talking about, you see how these horrible things that are happening around the world, and people are upset about it, and nobody knows. They all just feel like, what can we do? It's really sad to see. But there's got to, people are resilient. There's got to be a way that we can come together and do something about it.
The way that we have to basically squash our empathy for other people is kind of I think that's a part of like the deep psychosis that people are in right now. Is like I just have to suck it up. I can't feel bad for other people. I mean, and that's kind of an old thing in capitalism. I mean, fundamentally, capitalism is, greed is good. But like even people who are like functioning and okay, like people are deeply unhappy, like, and I do feel like there is something traumatic about, especially for the people who are sensitive to, like witnessing the genocide and seeing, all of these other things happening. The problem is that it's there have been more successful and sophisticated mechanisms for giving people an outlet that is under the state's control, right? So the professionalization of social justice means that the whole model for how people grow up and they think, this is how I'm going to be an activist, or this is how has been basically incorporated into the state through either nonprofits or through academia. And so a lot of the ideology that I find myself confronting is a confusion essentially about identitarian politics as being the only valid kind of oppositional politics. And that's a whole other conversation, but like that agreement is there, but there's a lot of real substantive obstacles that prevent people from seeing or even imagining that we could organize and make a demand. It's almost like the idea of making a demand and sticking to that demand and pushing for it on like a large scale has been really very effectively kind of dismantled. And I hope that base building in small places can lead to more successful explosions, because I feel like that's kind of how things develop. Like you have places where conscious elements can develop things, and then there's another crisis that puts people into motion. But I'm just thinking about how to build that base, and I guess that's like the fundamental question. And Andy, at my workplace, it would be like starting a whole brand new campaign to be talking about don't collect data on students. And now I'm realizing, like, actually that would be a good thing to try. That might be interesting. It's just, I feel like even our own contract campaign can barely get momentum. You know what I mean?
Yep.
So
and just to be clear, I actually think that whatever you do, it has to be in the stream you're swimming in, like the Palestine stream. I wouldn't even recommend going down and doing a new data, talk about data with your colleagues per se. But like you said, how to weave this into the stuff you're doing around Palestine. That's how I think of it, at least.
Maybe.
Kenny, this could be the end, but I wanted to see, since we've been asking you some questions and bringing us up, are there any last comments or questions you want to raise before we kind of end this particular episode?
I mean, I'm impressed with you guys, how you've maintained sort of forward thinking and activism through all these times that where there's really been nothing, no real left, and it makes me. I've really enjoyed just sitting in this virtual room with you, and I think I would just say that I love and appreciate you guys a lot, and you guys give me hope that if anything, that that is possible for us to kind of build something that can push back against this, So I want to continue having conversation with you more in the future. So thanks again for inviting me to do this, and just my I appreciate it.
Thanks, Kenny. Love you too, and I'm really glad we've reconnected. And Michael, I'm grateful for Michael reconnecting with me, and to see some of my old comrades kind of come back with new faces and new thoughts. The old spirit is there, but I feel like not covered over with things that we were not going to be able to break through unless we got out, unless we went another way. So I'm really grateful for that. I don't know where this leads. Both me and Michael at different times have talked pretty hopelessly about the future. So don't worry about that, Kenny. People are used to that on this podcast.
Yeah.
But obviously we haven't given up. So something's moving us. And like Kenny, Michael said, that's sort of what our last episode was about. So you'll end up hearing that later. But it does give me hope when people who I respect and love kind of begin to come together and seek me out, and we just start to do our thing again. Because it's like what is that when you rub sticks together and it's more and more little sparks kind of coming, and eventually I do think flames can get produced. So that part encourages me.
Me too. But I did want to say before, you're under no obligation to be hopeful.
Yeah.
There's no obligation to be hopeful. The obligation we have is to be honest.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I agree with Michael on that. And both you can hear probably in that with me and Michael is some of the frustration of the ISO that used to say, you lead with this fucking hope that it wasn't even true. But anyway, why end with this bitterness?
Well, turn is just around the corner, Kenny.
I have to say, for me, like, I got my kids. I'm like, nope. I'm going to fight. It's revolution or death for me. I want to build a world for my kids, no matter at any cost. I mean, that's my goal in my life. I want them to have a future, and I do not. So, I mean, that's what I mean by hope. Like, who knows what's going to happen, but I want to fight for it, whatever it's going to be.
Yep. And you are welcome again here. Now that everyone knows you now, so you're welcome here anytime, and you can join our crew here. So that does it for this week's episode. What's Left is a weekly political podcast channel challenging the mainstream left. We post information about our topics and our guests on the episode notes wherever you found this episode, or on our blog, what'sleftpodcast.com. You can find a link to our blog in the episode notes. If you want to reach out to us and about ideas for future episodes, feel free to use the link to contact us at What's Left directly. And please, if you like anything you heard here, please subscribe, rate, review, turn on your notifications to any of our 7 platforms: Spotify, iTunes, BitChute, Odyssey, Rumble, YouTube, or Telegram. And let's see, for Andy and Michael and Kenny, thank you again for joining us. That's it for this week, and we'll be back next week. Bye-bye. All right. So here's the thought I have for you, Kenny.